Hi, I'm Stephanie Jaworski of JoyBaking.com. Today we're going to make a pound cake, and this is what it looks like. As you can see, it has a beautiful golden brown crust. Inside it is buttery rich with a soft and tender crumb. So the first thing that you will need to do is to preheat your oven to 350 degrees Fahrenheit, which is 180 degrees Celsius, and then you will need a loaf pan. This one measures 9 by 5 and 3 inches deep, which is 23 by 13 by 8 centimeters. And then you could just spray the inside of your pan with one of those non-stick sprays, but I'm going to butter my inside of my pan. So I melted a little bit of butter, and then I'm just using a pastry brush and do the bottom and the sides. Make sure you get into the corners. We do not want our pound cakes sticking. Okay, that looks good. And then I'm going to just take a small piece of parchment paper, just put that into the bottom of the pan. That'll make like doubly sure that the cake doesn't stick. And then I'm just going to lightly butter our paper. So that's our pan. Now to make our batter, if you have a stand mixer like I have here, use your paddle attachment, or you could use a hand mixer. And for a pound cake, this batter is a little different how we're going to mix it. Like when you make a butter cake, for example, you use what is called the creaming method, which means you take the butter and you beat it, add the sugar, beat it, eggs, and then the flour. And that will give you a really light and fluffy textured cake. But a pound cake, this pound cake, has a dense texture with a really soft and tender crumb. So we're going to mix it in a little different way to get that texture. So we're going to actually start with our dry ingredients. So you will need 1 1/4 cups, which is 150 grams of cake flour. Now cake flour is a low gluten flour, and that also is going to contribute to that soft and tender crumb. And then you will need 1 teaspoon, which is 4 grams of baking powder. And that's going to give us a little lift to our pound cake. And then 1/4 teaspoon, 1 gram of salt. And 3/4 cup, 150 grams of granulated white sugar. It's kind of unique. We put all the dry ingredients. So now what I'm going to do is just put my mixer on low speed, and we're just going to mix everything together. You know, maybe 30 seconds or so to make sure everything gets mixed. Okay. And then butter. Pound cakes, lots of butter. You will need 3/4 cup, which is 170 grams of butter. I'm using unsalted butter. I like the flavor better, and I also like to control the salt in the recipe. But if you have a favorite salted butter, you can use that. And then I would just leave out that 1/4 teaspoon of salt that I added. Now, have your butter at room temperature, which means, you know, when you press it, your finger will easily leave an indentation. And then along with that, you will need, in a separate bowl, I have 3 large eggs. And again, have your eggs at room temperature. 3 large eggs out of the shell is 150 grams. To that, I'm going to add 3 tablespoons, 40 grams of milk. Again, have your milk at room temperature. The milk is going to add richness, and it also is going to make the pound cake batter more fluid. And then for flavoring, I'm adding 1 1/2 teaspoons, 6 grams of pure vanilla extract. Now, some people prefer their pound cakes without the vanilla flavor. If that's the way you like it, then just leave out the vanilla. And I'm just going to whisk this together. Okay, and so what we're going to do is a little different. Actually, this is an easier batter to make. There's not a lot of mixing involved. So actually, if in a pinch, you could do this by hand. So that's that. Now we're going to add all the butter at once. And One at room temperature so it really easily mixes in. And when you do it this way, the butter is going to coat the flour, which means you get less gluten development, which really means you get that soft and tender crumb. So that's the reason we're doing it this way. And then I'm going to add just like maybe about half of my egg mixture. I mean, just eyeball it. And then I'm going to mix this on low speed just until all the dry ingredients get moistened. Okay, that didn't take long. Now periodically, if you have to stop and scrape down the sides and the bottom of your bowl, you want to make sure everything gets mixed together. Sometimes it sticks on the bottom. That looks good. So now what we're going to do is we're going to put our mixer on medium speed, and we're going to beat this for about 1 minute. Actually, I'm going to use my timer here because this is going to develop the structure of our pound cake, because what you got to beat it a bit to get a bit of gluten development so that our cake, once it's baked, it won't fall apart. We want it soft and tender, but we want it to hold together. So what I'm going to do, put it on medium and beat it for 1 minute. Okay, we're at 1 minute. I find it easier to set my timer than try to count. So as you can see, it did really lighten in color. Get nice and fluffy. So scrape that. So that's our main mixing right there. So now we still have a bit of that egg mixture left. We're going to add that in 2 additions. And I'm just going to beat that in on medium-low speed. You know, maybe it'd take about 30 seconds. Okay, scrape that, and pour in the rest. Make sure I get all that. And then I'm just going to beat that in again. And we're done. I mean, you must admit that's pretty quick and easy. A little different, but not hard. Let's scrape down that. Make sure everything's mixed in there. And then just pour it into your pan. And we're ready to bake. And then you can use your offset spatula or the back of a spoon just to even that out. Okay, that looks good. Those corners. So now, for baking, as I always say, everyone's oven is a little different. I'm going to give you a time frame of between 55 and 65 minutes. And I do like to rotate the pan front to back about halfway through baking. That gives more even baking because typically you have hot spots in your oven. So what will happen is it will rise, it will turn that beautiful golden brown, and a toothpick inserted into the center will come out clean. Now, this is what happens to pound cakes. You will get a crack down the center. That it does do that, so don't panic when yours does that. If you do find your cake gets a little too brown for your liking, before it's done. What you can do is take a piece of foil and then lightly butter it and put it over the top of the pan, and then that will prevent the cake from browning anymore. You put the butter on there so that it doesn't stick to the top of the cake. You don't want that. So just keep that in mind. If you maybe check at about 40 minutes, somewhere around there, and if it's browning too much, then put the foil over top. But I'm going to say 55 to 65 minutes. Okay, so our pound cake is done. Put your pan on a wire rack. As you can see, beautiful golden brown. I didn't have to put the foil on top of mine, so just for reference. And a toothpick, insert it into the center, came out clean. You can also see it's just barely starting to pull away from the sides of the pan. That's another sign that it's done. So now what we are going to do is just let this cool for about 10 minutes, and then when we come back, we'll take it out of the pan. Okay, so now we're ready to take our pound cake out of the pan. What I like to first do is just take a little butter and just butter our rack. So that way as the cake cools, it won't stick, because we don't want to leave that beautiful crust stuck to our cake rack. And then just take, a knife, or I'm using an offset spatula, just run it around just to make sure it's not sticking. And then just gonna flip it. Yes. If your paper sticks, just peel it and then just gently flip it like that. And there's our pound cake. So it's still quite warm. I'm going to let it cool down, and then when we come back, we'll try a slice. So now let's cut a slice. Okay. Oh, there we have it. Oh, I love the contrast of the golden brown with the almost slightly yellow color inside. It's just beautiful, and you feel it, it's so soft. Now, pound cakes, the actual name comes from the fact that the original recipes were 1 pound, you've got the butter, the sugar, the eggs, and the flour, equal weights. So for the recipe we made, we're pretty close to that. The sugar, the eggs, and the flour were 150 grams. I did use a little more butter at 170, but pretty close. And nowadays the recipes do vary a little, and we did add the baking powder to give our cake a little more lightness to it in texture, and then we added the vanilla flavor, and then again the milk to get the batter a little more fluid, but pretty close to the original. So let's try. Now, I don't frost this pound cake. I mean, you could, but I just like to enjoy it as it is. It is buttery. It's sweet, but not overly. Rich and buttery, and it's very moist, and it's soft and tender. It kind of almost melts in your mouth. And you know what I like? The day you make this cake, the crust is it's crisp. So you have that against the softness of the pound cake. It's just perfect. Now this crust, once you cover and store it, it will soften. It's still excellent. Now, I just eat it plain like this. Now, I remember when I was a kid, I actually would spread butter on my pound cake. I think that's a little over the top. It doesn't need, but I'm not against doing that. And you could use this, you could serve it with some whipped cream and some fruit like strawberries or any kind of fruit really. I think that would be very nice. I often use it to make trifles as the cake layer. You can even kind of toast it It's really good like that. And you can, if you wanted to, you could dust the top with some powdered sugar. Or like I said, you could put a frosting. I really don't think, try it just like it is to see, because I think you'll just enjoy it as it is. You can cover and store this for several days at room temperature, or you can freeze it. So try this one. And until next time, I'm Stephanie Jaworski of joyofbaking.com.